Welcome to APUSH Period 4, Age of Reform, 1790 to 1860. Let's explore the big ideas from this era. The Second Great Awakening, along with social ideas from abroad and romantic beliefs in human perfectibility, sparked the rise of voluntary organizations. These organizations aim to promote both religious and secular reforms. A key example here is the women's rights movements. During this period, various groups, including American Indians, women, and religious followers, began to develop cultures that reflected their unique interests and experiences. This cultural development was also mirrored by regional groups and the emerging urban middle class. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the Second Great Awakening itself. This was a pivotal moment that brought about significant religious and social changes. Let's dive into the transformative period of the Second Great Awakening and a significant shift in religious and cultural viewpoints in America. First, let's explore the continuation of traditional beliefs. Many people still held on to their beliefs, but there was a dramatic change with a new emphasis on evangelicalism. The rise of Romanticism meant that emotion started to trump reasoning, and there was a stronger focus on personal salvation. This shift contributed to the growth of denominations like Presbyterians, Methodists, and Baptists. We also saw the emergence of new religious movements such as Adventism, with its focus on the imminent return of Jesus, and the Latter day Saint movement, or Mormonism. Now let's contrast this with the Age of Reason, where the continuation was again traditional beliefs. However, the change was marked by the rise of deism and the questioning of supernatural claims. This period emphasized reason, science, and individual liberty, challenging the divine right of kings. Although deism wasn't widespread, it encouraged a reliance on reason over revelation, and it prioritized moral teachings over miracles. A notable example is Thomas Jefferson, who famously edited the New Testament to remove miracles. In essence, we moved from the Age of Reason to the Second Great Awakening. We witnessed a blend of old and new. Traditional beliefs remained, but there was a clear pivot towards individual experience and emotional engagement with faith. What stayed the same was the underlying religious framework, but the approach and emphasis shifted dramatically. Let's look at the impact of the Second Great Awakening. One of the primary reasons this movement gained traction was the concern over the perceived lack of religious zeal among the populace. This era witnessed a counteraction to the ideas of deism, which emphasized reason and questioned traditional religious beliefs. In response, a wave of revivals spread across the country, most notably through camp meetings on the frontier. A key figure during this time was Charles Finney, a revival preacher who stirred religious fever in New York during the 1830s. He stood firmly against slavery and alcohol, gaining many converts who identified as born again Christians. This led to a notable boost in church attendance and the formation of new religious sects. Methodists and Baptists, in particular, experienced significant growth. They emphasized personal conversion over predestination and encouraged democratic control of church affairs. This period saw a shift towards emotionalism in worship, making religious experience more personal and impactful for many. As we move forward, we'll explore how these evangelical fervor spurred broader reform efforts, including movements for prison reform, temperance, and women's rights. Let's continue to see how these changes shaped the era. The transformative effects of the Second Great Awakening. A major takeaway is how the surge in evangelicalism significantly inspired reform efforts, marking what we often refer to as the Age of Reform. Key areas included prison reform, temperance, the women's movement, and the fight against slavery. These were all deeply influenced by the religious revival sweeping the nation. Women played a pivotal role during this period. They became the majority of new church members, taking on the vital role of bringing their families back to God. This involvement did not stop at the church. It propelled them into various reform movements, amplifying their societal influence. As we see, the Second Great Awakening wasn't just about religious change, it was a catalyst for broad social reform. Let's look at the story of the Mormons. It begins with Joseph Smith, who founded the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. Smith led his followers to Illinois, but his journey was fraught with conflict. Tensions arose between his followers and other settlers, culminating in Smith's murder by an armed mob in 1844. After Smith's death, Brigham Young stepped in to guide the faithful. In 1846 to 47, he led them to what is now Utah, where they established a thriving cooperative frontier community. The settlement grew rapidly thanks to both a high birth rate and immigration through missionary efforts. However, the Mormons faced significant challenges, including the Utah War, which was a conflict with the federal government. One dark chapter was the Mountain Meadows Massacre, where 120 settlers were killed by a Mormon militia. Due to the controversial issue of polygamy, Utah would not be amended into the Union until 1896. This period was marked by great trials and triumphs, reflecting the broader spirit of reform and transformation during the Second Great Awakening. Let's explore the impact of democratic and individual beliefs on societal changes during this era. These shifts in response to rationalism and the market revolution ignited a wave of moral and social reforms. Consider how these changes enabled greater social and geographical mobility. This mobility wasn't just physical, it also represented the spread of ideas and beliefs. Such dynamics not only led to moral reforms, but also inspired utopian and religious movements. The age of reform wasn't just about changing institutions, it was about transforming society. The rise of democratic values empowered individuals to challenge the status quo and seek improvement in their communities. As we move forward, keep in mind how these foundational changes provided the momentum for figures like Dorothy Dix and Horace Mann to pioneer significant reforms in mental health and education. Dorothy Dix. Dorothy Dix was a pioneering journalist who dedicated herself to reforming mental health treatment. She journeyed across the country documenting the dire state of mental health facilities and the treatment of patients. Her commitment and extensive documentation brought much needed attention to the issues. One of Dix's most significant contributions was her role in advocating for professional treatment for the mentally ill. Her efforts led to the establishment of more humane and effective treatment practices, which marked a turning point in mental health care. As we reflect on her legacy, let's consider the impact of individual dedication on societal change. Dorothy Dix's work reminds us that committed advocacy can lead to meaningful reform and improve countless lives. Education reform during the Age of Reform. In the early years of the Republic, tax supported schools were uncommon. However, education reformers recognized several benefits to public education. First, education was seen as a way to instill Republican values and essential traits like discipline and hard work. It was also a means to foster assimilation or Americanize immigrants. Horace Mann, as Secretary of Massachusetts Board of Education, was a pivotal figure in this movement. He advocated for longer school terms, compulsory attendance, expanded curriculums, and the establishment of more schools. This reform wave significantly impacted the North more than other regions. It's important to note that during this time it was illegal for black slaves to learn to read and write, highlighting the racial inequalities that persisted even amid reform efforts. Through these reforms, a foundation was laid for the modern education system, though its benefits were unevenly distributed across society. Let's look at the temperance movement, a key chapter in our history. First, let's consider the roots of the drinking problems. The factory system required efficient labor, and excessive drinking was seen as a barrier to productivity. It also posed challenges to family life, with many viewing it as an issue linked with Irish and German immigrants. In addition, women saw drinking as a key issue as it caused abuse at home. In response to the American Temperance Society, Emerging in 1826, it urged people to abstain from alcohol. They were incredibly effective in spreading their, quote, dry message through various forms of propaganda. Their approach evolved from encouraging personal choice to advocating for legal prohibition. This shift culminated in the Maine Law of 1851, which prohibited the manufacture and sale of liquor, laying the groundwork for nationwide prohibition with the 18th Amendment. This movement is a reminder of how grassroots initiatives can lead to significant legislative change. Keep this in mind and how historical shifts continue to shape our perspectives today. As we delve into the debate over the role of women during this period, it's crucial to understand how societal norms and expectations shaped their experiences. Women were indeed treated as second class citizens, excluded from the democratizing changes of the age of common man. The cult of domesticity reinforced that the home was considered a woman's special sphere, where her primary role was managing the household and nurturing the family. This was closely tied to the concept of Republican motherhood, which emphasized the importance of mothers in raising children to be good citizens ingrained with Republican values. These ideals were pervasive, yet they set the stage for the growing awareness and demand for women's rights. As we move forward, we'll see how women began to resist these confines and advocate for equality. Women's resistance. Let's start with the women reformers, who were deeply inspired by the Second Great Awakening. This spiritual revival gave them the courage to demand changes in three key areas: women's rights, the temperance movement, and the abolition of slavery. Notice how these reformers were not just focused on one issue, they were part of a broader, interconnected struggle for justice and equality. Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were trailblazers in advocating for women's suffrage. Their work was instrumental in organizing the first Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls in 1848. At this convention, Stanton famously read the Declaration of Sentiments, echoing the foundational American belief that, quote, all men and women are created equal. This was a rallying cry for women's right to vote and marked the launch of the modern women's rights movement. As we reflect on this, consider the courage it took for these women to stand up and demand their rights in society that marginalized their voices. Their actions set the stage for future generations that continue to fight for equality. Transcendentalism. This was a shift away from the Enlightenment's age of reason. This movement emphasized that truth can transcend transitory sensory experiences and is not just discovered through observation. Each of us possess an inner light capable of revealing the highest truths according to transcendentalism. Ralph Waldo Emerson played a pivotal role here, advocating for self reliance, self improvement, and freedom. His speech, The American Scholar, delivered at Harvard in 1837, was a call for Americans to forge their own cultural identity. Henry David Thoreau, another key figure, was a philosopher and abolitionist. His works on duty of civil disobedience and Walden reflected his commitment to living deliberately and questioning societal norms. Imagine Thoreau living in a cabin by the lake for 2 years, seeking simplicity and deeper understanding. Transcendentalism invites us to reflect on how we perceive truth and encourages us to look within for guidance and inspiration. Utopian communities. Let's consider why these movements emerge as an alternative to conventional society. First, we have the Mormons, who sought to create a religious communal effort. This group aimed to build a society grounded in their spiritual beliefs and values. Next, the Brook Farm experiment in Massachusetts represented a communal transcendentalist effort. This was a secular and humanistic community where individuals worked together inspired by transcendentalist ideals. Lastly, New Harmony was a response to the challenges of industrialization. It aimed to establish a socialist type community, providing a new social framework to address emerging economic issues. Each of these communities sought to address societal problems in unique ways, reflecting diverse visions of a better world.